The 2026 FIFA World Cup, the biggest in history. 48 nations, 3 host countries, hundreds of millions of people watching. And absolutely no shortage of players that the world would love to see fail. Because every World Cup comes with its own cast of villains. The ones getting booed off pitches, the ones winding up their own teammates. The ones that make neutral fans pick a side just because they're so desperate to see them lose. This tournament is no different. Today, we're going through every major nation at the 2026 World Cup and finding the most hated player they brought with them. Neymar. Brazil at a World Cup without drama would be like Christmas without the arguments. Technically possible, but it's never actually happened. And the drama usually has a name attached to it. That name is Neymar Junior. Let's be clear about what Neymar actually is. One of the most naturally gifted footballers the world has ever produced. The skill, the creativity, the ability to do things with a football that genuinely don't look legal. It's all there. Always has been. And that's precisely what makes him so infuriating to half the planet. Because for all that talent, Neymar has spent the better part of a decade handing ammunition to his critics faster than his supporters can reload. The diving. Oh, the diving. The rolling around on pitches like the floor is on fire. The screaming. The theatrics that make even sympathetic observers wince. A $222 million transfer that shook the football world. And then season after season of injuries arriving at the exact moments they were needed least. Every tournament. Every crucial point in his career. Something gives way. And even when he's fit, there's always something. A goal celebration designed to wind someone up. A press conference with more film than football. A social media presence that prioritizes persona over performance. Brazil are one of the most gifted national sides on this planet, and their most recognizable export in a generation is a man whose legacy is a permanent debate between what he is and what he should have been. But the drama doesn't end there for Brazil when they also have Vinicius Junior has been racially abused in stadiums, taken legal action against entire football federations, and become the face of anti-racism in modern football. He has also spent the last 3 years winding up absolutely every opponent he's ever faced, and doing it with a smile. That's the thing about Vinicius that nobody can quite resolve. He is genuinely one of the 2 or 3 most electric players at this entire World Cup, devastating, impossible to contain when he's flying. And when he scores, he will dance. He will celebrate directly in front of the defender who just spent 90 minutes trying to kick him into another postcode. And you will watch it, and you won't be entirely sure how to feel. Because Vinicius Junior exists in a space where sympathy and irritation are somehow the same emotion. A man who was handed a reason to be angry at the world, and decided to weaponize it instead. Leandro Paredes. Argentina won the 2022 World Cup. They have Messi, arguably the best footballer who has ever walked the earth. So in theory, you'd struggle to find a reason to dislike anything about Argentina. And then there's Leandro Paredes. If you've ever watched an Argentina match and clocked a midfielder cynically chopping someone down, following through on a tackle that had absolutely no intention of winning the ball, and then looking surprised when the referee reaches for his pocket, that's Paredes. The man has made a career at the highest level out of being football's most reliable nuisance. He's not hated in a way that makes you genuinely emotional. He's hated in the specific, exhausting way that makes you go, "Oh, him," every single time he appears on screen. The yellow cards aren't accidental. The sly elbows aren't mistakes. Leandro Paredes is a professional problem causer operating under a thin veneer of professionalism. And football fans everywhere can see exactly what he's doing. Darwin Nunez. Uruguay at a World Cup is always an event. They don't play the prettiest football. They don't try to. They play effective, physical, uncompromising football with a layer of menace baked into the system. And they always bring at least one player who feels like they were specifically designed to push everyone else to the edge. Darwin Nunez is that player. Watch enough Darwin Nunez and you'll experience both extremes within a single match. The devastating center forward who looks unplayable, explosive, terrifying to defend against, and the completely separate Darwin Nunez who has apparently never seen a goal before in his life. The contrast is legitimately baffling. The red cards. The missed sitters in front of open goals. The moments where he swings at a ball and connects with nothing but air from 8 yards out. And at international level, there's no safety net. Uruguay play with edge, and Nunez brings that edge right to the border of self-destruction. He will score a crucial goal in this tournament. He will also do something that makes you question physics, composure, and basic football understanding. Possibly in the same game. Rios. Colombia are one of the more exciting sides in South American football right now, fluid, dynamic, genuinely dangerous going forward. They're hard to hate as a collective. But hard to hate doesn't mean impossible, and Rios is the name to watch here. An abrasive, Tenacious midfielder who wins balls he has no business winning and picks up yellow cards at a rate that suggests he treats cautions as participation trophies. Colombia's football is good enough that you don't notice him until he's stamping on someone's ankle, and then you can't unsee it. Christian Pulisic. Now look, let's be fair. Christian Pulisic is a good footballer. He works hard, he scores important goals, he's shown consistency at the highest level for a sustained period. The problem isn't Pulisic the player. The problem is what Pulisic represents, and the weight of expectation that's been draped around his shoulders since he was 19 years old. American football discourse has been building Pulisic as the savior of US soccer for the better part of a decade. The chosen one. The bridge between American sport and the rest of the world. The proof that football culture in the States is finally, truly, arriving. And every time he scores for his club, that faction reaches maximum decibels. The rest of the world does not share this assessment. And the gap between American football Twitter's perception of Pulisic and the actual evidence produces a very specific type of eye roll. A solid, reliable winger at a big club is not the same thing as a generational talent, and the conflation of the two is exactly the sort of hype that makes opponents and neutrals quietly hope he has an anonymous tournament. Edson Alvarez. Mexico arrive at every World Cup with a fanbase that is genuinely convinced this is the year they get past the round of 16. They have done this consistently for 30+ years. The optimism never dies. It's almost admirable. Edson Alvarez is Mexico's most divisive player. A midfielder who plays like every game is the last thing standing between him and a ban. Physical, aggressive, willing to bend the rules in a way that his manager has clearly sanctioned. He's effective, no question. But effectiveness and annoyingness aren't mutually exclusive, and Alvarez has spent years mastering the combination of both. Jordan Henderson. This one hits differently, because the hatred aimed at Henderson isn't about ability or price tags. It's about character. Or at least the perceived collapse of it. Henderson spent over a decade at Liverpool as one of English football's most vocal allies of the LGBTQ+ community, wearing the armband, making the gestures, doing the interviews, positioning himself as one of the good ones. And then in the summer of 2023, he packed his bags and moved to Al Ettifaq in Saudi Arabia, a country where homosexuality is not just frowned upon but illegal. For the money. For the bag. The backlash was immediate, devastating, and entirely earned. Because you can quietly change your mind about your values. That's human. But you cannot spend years building a public identity around those values and then cash in on the opposite and expect people to just move on. The LGBTQ+ community felt specifically betrayed. Former allies felt embarrassed. And the football world, which had genuinely respected him, suddenly had questions. Then, within 6 months, he left Saudi Arabia for Ajax, essentially admitting the whole thing hadn't worked out, which made it worse. Not a principled decision. Not a sporting adventure. Just a poorly judged detour that ended quietly, leaving a complicated legacy trailing behind him. At 35, at a World Cup, Jordan Henderson is carrying baggage that has nothing to do with football. And that's precisely why he's on this list. Kylian Mbappe. Right. There are levels to this. On one level, Mbappe is one of the 2 or 3 best players on the planet. Electric, devastating, the kind of footballer that makes you stop what you're doing and stare at the screen because you're not sure what he's going to do next. The speed. The finishing. The moments where he plays football that doesn't look physically possible. On another level, the drama. The PSG era that seemed to drag on forever. With contract saga after contract saga, each one more exhausting than the last. The perception that France's entire tactical setup exists to accommodate one person, with a player as decorated and consistent as Antoine Griezmann being shuffled around the pitch like a chess piece that never got a say in the matter. The way his entourage operates like a parallel government, inserting themselves into every decision with the confidence of people who've confused access with authority. And now he's at Real Madrid, succeeding at the biggest club in the world. Which means a significant portion of football's neutrals who already found him grating now also have to watch him collect Champions League medals and act like he was always the missing piece. That combination of talent, drama, and Real Madrid affiliation is a recipe for widespread, long-term loathing. Lamine Yamal. Now, before you say anything, yes, he's 18. Yes, he's extraordinary. Yes, watching him play football at this age feels genuinely illegal in the best possible way. None of that is the point. The point is what Yamal represents to the people who can't stand him, and there are more of them than you'd think. Because the world has been told, repeatedly and loudly, that this teenager is the next Messi. The chosen one. The heir. The generational talent that comes along once in a lifetime, except apparently he came along 17 months after the last one. And for a certain type of football fan, that level of hype directed at an 18-year-old who hasn't won a World Cup yet, hasn't survived a bad season yet, hasn't faced genuine adversity yet. It produces a very specific kind of resentment. Not hatred exactly, more like exhaustion. The machine around Yamal moves faster than the evidence, and the gap between the narrative and the reality is where the eye-rolling leaves. He'll probably be brilliant at this tournament, which will make it worse. Cristiano Ronaldo. Before you click away, take a breath. Because this isn't about whether Ronaldo is great. He is. The records, the titles, the consistency across 3 decades of elite football. It's historic, it's real, and none of that is up for debate in this video. What is up for debate is what he's doing here. At 41 years old, playing Saudi Arabian club football, still showing up at a World Cup demanding the spotlight, expecting to start doing this in front of stadiums that are, and let's not pretend otherwise, watching a player operating well below the level he once commanded. And that's precisely where the hatred comes from. Not from jealousy. Not from a failure to appreciate greatness. It comes from the refusal to acknowledge the gap between who he was and who he is. Ronaldo still plays like he's the best player in the world. His supporters still treat him like the best player in the world. But the evidence, Saudi Arabia, years of declining Champions League involvement, a Portugal tournament record that doesn't match the individual mythology, tells a different story that nobody in his camp seems willing to read. The players who get hated most aren't the ones who are genuinely evil. They're the ones who generate a reaction you simply cannot switch off. And nobody at this tournament, nobody, does that quite like Ronaldo. He walked into a 5th World Cup at 41. He's the Portugal captain. He's going to score a goal. He's going to point at the sky. He's going to do the jump. And the reaction from every corner of football will be exactly what it's always been. Half the world celebrating, half the world grinding their teeth. Antonio Rudiger. Germany do tournament football differently from most nations. Organized, precise, committed to the system over the individual. Which means their most hated player is less likely to be a prima donna and more likely to be the human embodiment of a calculated foul. Antonio Rudiger is that player. A defender who has spent his career at the very top of the game, Real Madrid, Chelsea, Germany, playing with an edge that occasionally tips into something referees take note of. Physicality is his game. Intimidation is his art. And in a tournament setting where every call gets scrutinized from every angle, Rudiger is exactly the kind of player that opposing fans will spend 90 minutes watching for the moment he goes too far. Wout Weghorst. The Netherlands have a long and distinguished tradition of technically good football combined with a very particular brand of collective arrogance that surfaces the second things stop going their way. Arguments erupt, blame shifts. The dressing room becomes a negotiation. Wout Weghorst is the name here, and not because he's a particularly elite footballer. He's useful, he works hard, holds the ball up, wins headers with a commitment that more gifted teammates occasionally forget to apply. But football history doesn't remember Weghorst for his link-up play. Football history remembers Wout Weghorst for walking up to Lionel Messi in the 2022 quarterfinal, and whatever was said in that exchange. And football history also notes that when the greatest player of all time takes the time to specifically tell you that he doesn't like you, that's a level of notoriety you don't earn on talent alone. Romelu Lukaku. Lukaku carries the most complicated legacy of anyone in this squad, a career marked by extraordinary goals, persistent fitness concerns, and a chapter at Chelsea that still makes people wince years later. A £97 million transfer followed by a very honest interview about wanting to leave, which ended in exactly the way you'd expect. Lukaku is a fascinating case, genuinely world-class at his best, genuinely capable of the most frustrating forms of unavailability at his worst. Big international tournaments have been kind and unkind to him in roughly equal measure. He's not hated in a simple way. He's hated in the specific, complicated way that only players who've promised so much and delivered so unevenly manage to achieve. Brahim Díaz. Born in Malaga, raised in Spain, developed through the Spanish football system, Manchester City, AC Milan, Real Madrid. On paper, Brahim Díaz is a Spanish footballer. Except he's not representing Spain at this World Cup. He's representing Morocco. And that decision, however genuine the cultural connection, has followed him everywhere. Spanish fans feel like he turned his back on a system that built him the moment he calculated Morocco was the easier route to a major tournament. Moroccan fans, meanwhile, have their own complicated feelings about a player whose entire football education happened in Europe, who carries himself with the polish of someone who grew up far from Casablanca, and who they're still not entirely sure is here for the badge or the opportunity. Díaz is talented, genuinely creative, capable of producing moments that shift games. But he carries the specific, uncomfortable energy of a man who made a choice that neither side has fully forgiven him for. Kang-in. You want to talk about a player who alienated an entire nation? This is your man. Son Heung-min is not just South Korea's best footballer. He is a cultural institution. The most beloved sporting figure in the country, a man who carries the hopes of an entire nation every time he pulls on that shirt, a captain who has given everything for the badge for over a decade. You do not mess with Son Heung-min in South Korea. You simply do not. Kang-in did not get that memo. During the 2024 Asian Cup, reports emerged of a physical altercation between Kang-in and Son in the dressing room, a confrontation that fractured the squad, embarrassed the nation, and contributed to a tournament exit that South Korea should never have suffered. The details were damning enough. But the image, a younger player physically clashing with the captain, the legend, the man the whole country loves, was something the Korean fanbase could not process, let alone forgive. He's talented. PSG don't sign passengers. But every time Kang-in touches the ball at this World Cup, millions of South Korean fans will be watching with their arms folded. And that's a weight that doesn't disappear just because the tournament changed. And that's it. See you in the next one.